You're listening to Interview Time. Monster Rally is the creative ecosystem of Cleveland-based artist, designer, and producer Ted Feighan. Feighan scours thrift shops, estate sales, and used vinyl bins for long-forgotten exotica, tropicalia, and obscure 60s South Asian pop records, re-contextualizing them into richly sampled instrumental hip-hop albums, all of which are adorned with handmade collages of verdant jungle flora and fauna. Feighan creates a total sensory experience, transporting the listener into a lush, tropical fantasy world filled with adventure, mystery, and playful jungle creatures. In this episode, Feighan and I discuss his latest release, Castaways Volume 1, his creative life, and how, by discovering the long-lost world of exotica, he found artistic freedom. Ted Feighan, welcome to Interview Time.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
So you just, I think in August you just released Castaways Volume 1, which is a collection of 4 EPs, and then you've added sort of, I think, 1 or 2 like unreleased tracks from each one of those EPs onto it.
Yep.
I'm just curious why did you decide to kind of compile that and release that as one package now?
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing it for kind of a long time. What the main driver for me really was that when I started the project and really until now, I'm big into the vinyl because the vinyl is so much of a part of the composition of the music. You know, it's about like searching for and finding those records and sampling them and then returning them to their vinyl form. So the fact that I have music, especially that are in EPs, you know, like anything that's beyond a single, so like an EP or a longer single or something that's not on vinyl bothers me. And I don't expect to release everything at the same time like that necessarily, but I've been trying to find a vinyl home for all of my music like that to this point. So I started with these, and then ideally, hopefully next year there'll be a volume 2. Volume 2.
You're a musician. You're a visual artist. You and your wife run Valley Cruise Press.
Yep.
You're an incredibly creative person, and I just wanted to know: have you always been so creatively driven, even as a child?
Thank you, by the way. I don't really think about it so much like that. When I was younger, like not so much. I think I always had interest in creative things, although didn't feel so much like a creative person myself. I think for kids, it's sort of hard to say. I never like got told I was drawing a lot or I was not like a prodigy when I was younger or something playing music. But I like always had these passions. So, you know, as soon as I was able to like really get into music, I got like very into it, and I wanted to know everything about all the people who made it and all these things. Like I remember I used to drive to school. I went to a school that was like 45 minutes away when I was in middle school. My mom would drive me every day, and we used to listen to the rap and R&B station. And I remember just like telling her for hours about the different like rap cliques and who was involved with what and who the producers were. And like, I was like, the Rough Riders, like they got DMX in the front here. Okay. But over here, like these are the Wu-Tang people, and they got RZA, and he's the one making all the beats. And so my mom, I don't think she cared at all, but I was just like, so interested into that kind of stuff. And then I didn't start playing music really until I was in 6th grade. Just like started playing guitar and stuff, and had like a 4-track recorder and was making a bunch of stuff. And around that time, because of music, I got into the artwork because it was sort of a means to create the visual for the music. And that just sort of carried me through really until today. I'm doing the same thing, just in a bit of a different way.
So even though sorry, you said in the 6th grade you started playing guitar.
Yeah.
And then, but at the same time, you started recording. You got a 4-track recorder and started recording.
Yeah, that I was always more interested in that. Really, like I had friends. We all sort of started at the same time. So like we're all playing guitars, and all your friends. You know this if you were ever a 6th, 7-year-old dude or a 6th, 7th, 8th grade dude who had friends who were learning how to play guitar. You're just hearing like the first 4 notes of the national anthem for like an hour.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm going to get it, like, hold on. And then they crank up the distortion because we all saw the Jimi Hendrix Woodstock national anthem. And then you're just like, no, this one is awesome. But I like to this day still can't play any songs on guitar. Like I cannot play other people's songs because I never learned them. That was never like my interest was playing like learn how to play Freebird or learn how to play, Satisfaction or something. Like I was always just more interested in the methods of just like, even if it wasn't very good, and most of it wasn't, but just like making my own music, So that was like, I got the guitar and then I was like immediately with the recorder, just trying to like do the guitar and then like have like my sister's boyfriend had a bass. So it was just like trying to play on the bass and just, like a little bit of drums or something. Like I was much more interested in creating new stuff. And even the stuff I made, to this day, I still can't even remember a lot of it. Like it's a good thing. Like I have a lot of stuff recorded and I have to think like I should put this out. And then I think, well, if I put it out and people liked it, like I'd have to relearn how to play it. Like there's no way.
So it was always sort of like you were always interested in just creating like your own thing always.
Yeah. And I think like I was never, and even I'll say it now, like I was never particularly skilled. I had like a lot of enthusiasm for learning how to, use these like analog things to record and just like different instruments. And I was always buying any instrument I found at a thrift store, that kind of thing. Just like, even if I didn't know how to play it, I could figure out how to play like a couple of notes that would go with like this other thing,
Right. So you also mentioned to me at the same time that so you were recording, you were playing. So when you started recording right away and you started the visual side of it as well.
Yeah. Right. Because it was like right away, all right, so I'm playing this and then a couple of my buddies, so like, all right, we have a little band or something. And so now like right away we need t-shirts, or like we need cover art for our record. Like nobody cared but us. Like the first ones I ever made were like screenshots of Super Mario 3 NES, and I would just find like the 16-bit text and had it say the band name. And then we would just buy the iron-on transfers from Staples or something and just like iron them on our shirts. And like we were the only ones who wore them, but I was just like, yeah, this is awesome.
And were you guys handing out records or tapes or however CDs?
Yeah, it was mostly CDs. Yeah, like a CDR for sure, like that with a little like insert of artwork and everything.
So things must have been working pretty well because your high school band, Driver's Side Impact, was kind of an emo band. You guys actually signed a record deal.
We did.
Right as
right
as you were graduating.
To say that things went pretty well, I think, yeah, eventually they did. I mean, that was many, many years later. So like there was a couple bands in there, and actually some of them involved the same people that wound up being in DSI, as I always say. But
right.
Ending up being in DSI. And so that was cool. Like we all just sort of like, the people who wound up being, I don't want to say better necessarily, but more driven and just like to do the thing with music, those people sort of found themselves together, whereas the other people who were just playing the national anthem kind of got drifted apart. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I mean, years later, like I think I was in a version of the band, and then the actual version of the band that got signed from like sophomore year of high school until really like the next 6 years, maybe. I remember well when I was like February of 2006 when I was going to graduate high school. And I said, I remember having dinner with my parents being like, because they're very, very into colleges. My mom was like driving you around, check out all the colleges and stuff, being like, so, I'm not going to college. I got this band. And like, I really think we can do it. Which, I mean, like, of course, I mean, everybody says that and thinks that. It's probably even worse now because there's so many ways to get your music out there. But my parents actually took it pretty well. But then luckily, October that year, we signed the record deal. So like it was pretty fast.
How did you guys get discovered?
So we had been playing in Cleveland for a while. Just like, it's funny, I don't know if it's even still this way now, but back then it was like maybe the end of this before all the streaming stuff where it was like very regional, So we sort of had built up a following here, and we had some people who used to put on the shows. They had some management company, and so we were sort of like managed by them. But we were just like recording music all the time, making music, and we somehow got in touch with a handful of these record labels, and one of them was Victory, and we went and we did a showcase. So like they called us up, we went to Chicago, they rented out this like club, and it was just us with like a handful of people from the label. And we played and it was all good. And then at the last song, we only played 3 songs, and you're supposed to just go like so nuts, even though there's nobody there, and
right.
Particularly with that kind of music, it's like all about showmanship, So
Right.
like I'm on the amp, just like slamming the bass, I'm gonna like throw it over my shoulder or whatever. And on our last song, there was one point where it's supposed to come in like hard on the downbeat, and our drummer missed the downbeat. And like it's the most minor thing, but it really, like, if you're listening to Sign the Band, you're just like, "Mm." So that happened. Whatever. We drove back to Cleveland that night, just like so defeated. And then like 2 weeks later, we heard back from them. They're like, "Well, we like you, but like you missed that downbeat." Just like
Wow.
basically called us out, like, you're not ready to tour, because that is a big thing. It's like you have to tour, you have to go out there and show all these people how you do it. And we convinced them to have a second showcase. So before that one, we did like so much practicing beforehand, and then we went, and then I think we did as well as we could, and they offered us the deal. So it was like a months long process. I mean, years long to try to get them to listen to it, and then the actual getting of the record deal was like a couple of months, and then we signed it and we recorded the album like February of the next year.
What was it like? I mean, you talked about sitting at the dinner table with your mom and dad and totally into colleges, as I think
Right.
a lot of parents are. And
Yeah, I understand it.
what was it like for you though, at 18 years old? Most kids are going to college, or they're entering the workforce, or they're,
Right.
you're going out and you're kind of maybe living what had been your dream, you thought, up to that
Yep.
point. What was that experience like at that time?
I think, it was a combination of feeling like so hyped and gratified, and also just like still kind of like a little sad and disappointed, because what you think, like, you don't realize how many steps there are to the actual goal that you have. So, we're starting, like, we always say, like, we're going to get signed, we're going to get huge, all this sort of stuff, whatever. But in between that is like recording the album, and hopefully it catches on, and then touring these things, and then like feeling disappointed when the album doesn't do as well as you thought, or like you make this video and like they're not going to play it on Fuse or whatever, what I mean, and whatever at the time was. So like, and everything I just remember at the time was so like immediate and frantic. It was always like, you have to sign this right now or whatever. And I remember, this is a thing I had mentioned to you, that I was 18. The oldest dude was 21, and our drummer was 15. And so like he was in high school, and it was like, okay, turns out they're not going to sign you. The record deal's over because your drummer can't sign. So because he's not 18.
Wow.
So then it's just, I remember like all sitting at Applebee's, and somebody's just like, somebody get his mom, and so like we're calling like the label, like, let his mom sign it. Like, we have to get this record deal. So anyway, it all worked out, but everything sort of had that kind of tone, And I think because we're working with so many people in the band, and then there's the management, and then there's the label, and then it's just like suddenly getting signed is like what you thought was the absolute greatest, but it's just like the very beginning step of this whole potential like lifetime of your music with them. And for the label, that's just like I signed 3 bands this week, I'm hoping that one of them sticks. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah,
it's not what you thought, even the people who out the gate do so well, I'm sure it's still not what they thought. It doesn't matter where you are, you're always like learning if things aren't what you expected.
Did you guys go on a pretty extensive tour?
We did, yeah. Well, and so I think that was another misconception. I think like we're going to get signed, and then like suddenly we're touring with Thursday or something,
Right.
And anyway, so, but we did it. And then, yeah, we went out from the time we got signed after the album, and then for the full like year and a half after that, just like gone the whole time on mostly pretty whack tours, like you're playing in a VFW hall for, like 25 people or something. And like, that's fine. But there was so much pressure at the time, I think, because it was just like, but you're on this label and you're doing this thing and it should be better. Like, I play shows to small amounts of people like that all the time now. I mean, not so often, but I do. And I think like, this is cool that these people came, whatever, because it's a whole different mindset. But we did a couple like very big shows and some big tours that were cool, and then some that were just like small and moderate or whatever. I mean, most of the time, like, it was pretty fun, but it was also just very exhausting, and for me, like, I was always much more interested in the making, the writing of the music, and the recording of the music, rather than the performing of it was cool, but like it is such a spectacle. It wasn't so much about the music. It's more like, I need to get up there and like, I want to straighten my hair to look like these other dudes, but like, I'm so sweaty, so I'm going to sweat it all out, and I'm going to look like a sweaty mess on stage. And like that took priority in my mind over like, is this going to be sweet or not? You know what I mean? And it's like, am I looking like a sweaty fool in this band?
Right. So do you feel like maybe the kind of the and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did maybe the business side of it maybe start to kill the creative side of it for you? Or?
I think it did, but I also think it wasn't even so much that it was my own sort of expectation, and like it was the business, sure, and I guess sort of the expectation I and other people in the band were putting on ourselves of just like our appearance and being commercial and sort of stuff was like part of the business side too. And that, yeah, I mean, it wasn't even about being creative at any point in it. I think it was just about like, at its core, it was about being creative, but it was about being fun and just like having a good time and making music, and then like hopefully getting to continue to do that for your job, you know. But then when you get there and realize what that job entails at the beginning, you just might be like, this sucks, and I could work forever doing this and never have a better time, you know.
Yeah. What caused you to leave that? I think I read you left the band in 2008.
I did. Yep. I think I was just burned out and realized that we had been doing it for like a year or so. We did the album, and I think we had sold something like almost 800 copies of the album the first week, which in my mind, I think like, that's great. Yeah. And everybody was just like, the record is really or the label is really disappointed with your numbers, you know, like, so you don't get this tour or you don't get whatever. And so you're still like, all right, I'm just grinding it out there. But at the same time, like, I really hated touring. You know, I'm like a homebody. I like to be at home. I hate to be gone for so long. And like, I'm not down to sleep in a van all the time, which is fine. Like I had those experiences, and I'll never regret them. But a year and a half of doing that made me realize that, like, I think that like this is enough for me with this.
So after that happened, you enrolled at, maybe you moved back to Cleveland and you enrolled in Ohio State University. And
yeah, I came back to Cleveland and I went to community college here for like 6 months. And then I went to school in Chicago at DePaul for a year. And then I went to Ohio State.
And I saw that at Ohio State you studied printmaking.
I did, yeah.
Why did you decide to study printmaking? I was just curious, and maybe not music or...
Sure. I think I was just never felt like a skilled enough musician to study music. I would say it's now. I don't feel like a skilled enough musician. I can't read music. You know, like I said, I've been playing forever. I've been playing the guitar for like 18 years. I still can't play you a song. I mean, I can play you a song that I'm working on, but not somebody else's. And I think that's fine. Like I would have done it. I was very into design. I had been doing graphic design all through high school and with the bands and everything. And so I went to Ohio State, partially because my now wife was there. I mean, mostly because of that. And because they had a very good design program. So I want to get in this design program. It's going to be great. So my new goal after music was like, all right, sweet. So music's done. That was awesome. Now I want to run a creative studio. So that's my goal. And then I went and I didn't get into the design program. So I was like, all right, well, that's cool. I guess I'll just do this art thing. Like, I want to do that anyway. So I was always interested in like screen printing and making prints because I was coming from a digital platform. So going into that way, I thought was good. And so I wound up in printmaking. Ironically, I wound up in printmaking because my advisor was like, I know you're in this design end or whatever, and you didn't get in the program. Do you know this guy, Shepard Fairey? And I was like, I don't know Shepard Fairey. Who is this? And she was like, he's the Obey guy. Like, you know, he does a lot of design stuff, but it's all about screen printing. And I was just like, oh, well, that's awesome. And so that's why it's like very serendipitous that like that sort of led me into that path. And then I wound up doing the show at the gallery and everything.
I was going to say, you've worked with Subliminal and
yeah,
his group.
Yeah. I think I told him that when I met him. I was just like, funny enough, that you're like one of the reasons why I'm even doing this, which like what I do now is not at all printmaking, but it you know, my path led me to exactly where I am. And a lot of it was because of that.
How did you become interested in collecting vinyl? And did you always collect vinyl with the intention of creating with it?
Mm-hmm. For a brief period, no. And then after, yes. Before I was even making anything. So it was like when I was in the band, I started to sort of like, I still loved the music we were making, the like emo, screamo kind of stuff, but I started getting more into sort of indie bands and some electronic bands and stuff. And all those bands that I thought were like really cool, they all were putting out vinyl, you know?
Right.
So like, I remember getting like the Caribou record or something at a record store in Denver, and just because I would shop a lot while we were on tour at these record stores. So I was just like, oh, getting into all these records. and that sort of got my interest happening in vinyl. And from there, in the shopping, I just started collecting like a lot of stuff that I thought was cool. And then after I left the band, I was still shopping for records, and then I was mostly buying stuff thinking like, well, I think it would be cool to start sampling some of these records. And when I had started, like way before that concept, I was thinking, well, I was always been really into hip hop since I was younger. And then when I was older, I got into like some of the more indie producers, and I was thinking like, well, somebody who likes all this cool modern indie music would be a great hip hop producer, because like they could get the samples of all this stuff. And so that made me think like, well, I could do that. I didn't wind up doing it that way, but that's what sort of got me thinking like, all right, well, I'm going to buy just a bunch of records and then I'm going to sample them. So I was buying records for like 6 months before I even bought a sampler, I think.
How did you learn how to sample? Because that seems like a pretty involved process.
Well, I think actually sampling, it could be, I think, but for me, especially with the tools I was using, was like the epitome of me saying that I didn't have musical skill necessarily. I just had the enthusiasm for it. And so I was thinking like, I had this machine, this Roland SP303 is like the sampler I started with, and it's very simple and intuitive. And if you are able to just like have a vibe to make some music, you can get it going. And so basically that's what happened to me. I just got there and like, I found the way that it worked to sample this stuff and to get drums, and like the tactile nature of getting it going made me feel like this is something I can just do without even thinking too much. And that I think is like the best way to be making music. Like you don't want to overthink it. You want to be able just to like touch it and you know, make some sounds.
When did you feel like you were kind of good enough that you could start sharing the music?
Well, I think like it wasn't so much how I thought about it, but I was ready to share it as soon as I felt like I was making something that I really liked, that I was thinking like, well, maybe some other people might like this. And I think I did that initially in sharing it in sort of a way, like I wasn't attempting to be mysterious, but I didn't like say anything about myself. I just had like Monster Alley and here's the thing. And I like sent out a couple of emails to people to be like, here's some music. And like some of the first things that came up being like, this mystery person is making whatever. And I'm just like, I just wanted to be like I wanted low pressure, you know?
Right.
And like, I didn't even tell my wife or my sister or anything until like a month or so later, there was like featured on Gorilla vs. Bear, and I just like sent it to my sister, and I was like, so this is me, like I made this music. Yeah, and so like from there, yeah, like I don't know, like good enough or not, I don't really know, but like when I'm making it and I'm listening to it, I'm thinking like this is cool, and I think other people hopefully are sort of on the same mindset as me and would appreciate something like this.
So it seems like it was pretty quick.
It was pretty quick. I think so I left my old band in 2008, like January. I wasn't making any music, but I was buying records. And then it actually, I think, was the end of 2009 that I bought my sampler. So it was kind of a while. And so, but then from that point, like I a couple months later is when I started releasing the music. Like the very beginning of 2010, I was making in 2009, and I think it was like January 2010 is like the first stuff I put out.
Do you really remember kind of the first moment that you discovered like your first exotica record? Do you remember that moment?
I do. I was at a thrift store in Cleveland, and because it's the first one I bought. This is why I remember it so well. And I was just looking through some records I think it was just a thrift store, and I bought Quiet Village by Martin Denny. And like I had bought some tropical stuff before, but like mostly like Hawaiian sort of things, not really like true exotica. And so I got that one, and I had this it was like one of those Crosley record players, but like an older version of that from my grandma's house. And I would listen to it. The speakers were terrible. And yeah, I just like came home and put on that record. And sometimes you put it on like a record that you got at thrift store and you're just like, nah, whatever, like right away. And I put on that record, and like 40 minutes later, I was just like, I think maybe let's just do that again. And then just like back again. And then from there, anytime, like I still didn't know what I was looking for. You know what I mean? I didn't even know what exotica was or who these people were. And I don't even think I really looked it up. Every time I'd go back to the thrift store, to those record stores, I'd always look for like these sort of, you know, they're like cheeky or something, is I don't even know what the word is, but they're like sort of kitschy cover art, you know what I mean? And you just think like, all right, that's going to be a good one.
the album cover itself is kind of what was drawing you into
It
it.
was all about that. Yeah, like I was buying all that, just like all that sort of tropical, sort of worldy looking stuff. And the exotica records in particular are the best version of that because they're like on a soundstage. You know what I mean? So they're
Right.
not even like, this is what's sort of silly about it all, is that it's like so fabricated for what you think would be like that, which is why I like it, because it's like, it's not even about a real time or place or anything. It's just about like, this is what is would be like in an exotic jungle or something. Yeah. So I was just buying every one of those I saw.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Hollywood version of a place.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the thing, is like, it's not there. And even the music that I'm making out, people are always like, well, what places inspire you or all this? I'm just like inspired by imaginary far off places that are probably not even real and have influences that don't ever connect in real life. But I just like, I want to know what that sounds like. And when you hear it, especially with this exotica stuff, you feel it. You feel like you're there and like, this is this place, but it's actually not anywhere.
Yeah. It's like an idea of a place.
Right.
A fantasy idea of a place.
Exactly.
So it kind of leads me to my next question, which was, what is it about exotica, about tropicalia? I think you've produced, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but you've produced 7 full-length albums now, I think.
That sounds right. I'm not sure,
yeah.
but I think that's right. Yeah.
What is it about that music that continues to stimulate your imagination so much? You keep going back to that well and being able to create out of that. What do you think that is?
I think because there's always, especially with the way I'm making the records, that it's really just about like discovery. So it's like you're going through at a record store, a thrift store, and finding these old forgotten things, and you never know what you're going to find. And something there, like there's always room in that imaginary world for a new place and a new like theme and a new feeling. And so what I like about it is that even though sometimes it could seem, I guess, like it might be a bit of a rigid place, it's actually just anything you want it to be, because it's like you said, it's exotica, but it's really just about like fantasy. So like as limited as your own mind is at creating images when you hear the cinematic music, like that's the limit of the music.
How did Monster Rally begin to take shape? And I guess, like, how has it evolved since then?
I think it began to take shape, because it's interesting to talk about the whole like previous music experience, because feeling burned out from working with other people, feeling like I was sort of duped into thinking about what being a professional musician was. So like I came to that place, and when I was there, I thought, all right, well, I want to make music, but I don't want to base my life on it. You know, I don't want it to have the bearing of my full life and career. And so it has to be something that I just want to do. So from there, I think that really freed up a lot of stuff. And the way I wanted to do it was to just like, I don't know, I was all into the sampler and all into the records and stuff. And I knew right then, like, all right, so let's just try this. And I think in the beginning, I was really trying to make this like sort of, I always say like tropical Madlib. I loved Madlib. But like the first 2 EPs I did, I have like no drums. Like I just forgot to do the drums. But I think I was just like into the vibe of the stuff. And so I knew basically right after I started sampling some of these records that like, all right, so this is what I've been waiting to do. You know, this was the project that's like making me feel great. And like I was so excited to make music. Like I was skipping so many of my classes just to stay home and just make music and go to the thrift store and get records and come back, and like couldn't wait to see what they sounded like. And that was like in the very beginning. So like from there, I just knew like, all right, this is what I have to do.
So you kind of felt like you discovered your vision, maybe your own. I want to be cautious. I don't want to, but you kind of found your own voice or your own. And it seems like you, with Monster Rally, like you could kind of sort of remain. Well, what I'm hearing is like when you were in the band, there was constant pressure. It was like, okay, you guys, like you missed that downbeat.
Constant pressure.
You have to like do this.
Like you messed up at the show.
Yeah, your hair is not right. It's too wet.
Right.
Like, you know, and then now you have this place and it's sort of, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm getting is like, you have this like kind of sacred space. Like this is you, you're in control.
Very much so.
It's my world. I get to do
and
it.
I still feel that way. Like for me, I think like this is Australia and this is an important thing, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about how I looked. You know what I mean? It wasn't about like selling my image. It was about the music in this place. And so for me, I still think about it that way. Like Monster Alley, you know, quote unquote or whatever, is like, for me, for the person who's actually doing it, is like a location in my mind that I can go to, you know. And I was, when I was doing it, I was just like, you know, was like having like high anxiety and sort of stuff, but in doing the music, I was just like feeling great, you know, like I'm escaping into this with the sounds that I'm discovering. And just like, it's a sacred place to me. Like you said it, but I would have said the same thing. You know, that I still go to now when I'm working, you know. And I found it at that time. So I think that when I started doing it, it was clear to me. I didn't think like I would be doing it. I never thought I'd be doing it this long. But when I started then, I was just like, there's something to this, and like I can't wait to be there every time.
How did you come up with the name Monster Rally? Where did that name come from? It's
sure.
such a great name. It's just instant.
It is a good name. And like, I think about it so much as being associated with what I'm doing, but it's actually like such an aggressive sounding name.
Yeah.
So there was a book like around the same time, like 2008 period, when I was like buying all these records. My mom had moved some stuff out of her old childhood home. And one of these things that I found was a book called Monster Alley by Chaz Addams, who's the creator of the Addams Family.
Yes.
And so it's like a little book of one panel cartoons. And the front of the cover of the book, I never had the dust jacket, so I don't know what that looks like, but the front cover is like an embossed flag that says Monster Alley. And so I was just like, that'll be the name of the band. So I had the name of the band way before I was making any of the music. But then coincidentally now I have to be like, it's Monster Rally, and people are like, what? I'm like, it's like Monster Truck Rally without the truck.
Right. Well, I always think of, because you have in your art, in the art side of it, you have animals. There's a lot of like jungle birds and these creatures, and it kind of, I mean, all these things have meaning in it, you know. It's very clever, but yeah, it's like a rally of monsters.
Yeah, exactly. Or like an exotic beast or something like in the old literature that would have described this stuff. It would be like in these exotic monsters in the jungle, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. I read in an article in I found this great article that had been, I think it was called RVA or something like that. It was a blog, and this young lady wrote a really nice interview with you, and she talked about, in that article, it was right when you had released your LP Coral, your first album. First full length. And kind of at that time, you mentioned that an aspiration at that time in the interview, you said like, oh man, I'm hoping that like an MC will like really reach out to me, and because I'd really like to have somebody rap over it. And then I read another article, I think in Forbes in 2019, when you had released Adventures on the Floating Island. You had said in that article, I know that you had recorded with one MC, Jay Stone.
Right.
For I think Cognac, but your attitude seemed, you were like kind of like very cautious about that. Actually, you're like, I have the quote, I could dig it up in my notes, but you don't want it to change. You have to be very careful not to change the instrumental vibe of the music, I think is what you said. And I'm just curious, like how your thinking about this had evolved, why it had evolved sort of in that way. Over time.
I think, you know, initially, it's funny that I remember sort of back like when Coral came out, it was a lot like, because for that whole period, I was thinking like, all right, I'm making this hip hop, this instrumental hip hop, and like, so I need the other half of that, you know, like I need some MCs on there. And then I think as time grew on, it didn't take that long, but like a couple of years or something, it sort of, the music I was making became its own thing. And I realized a little bit more, like, I think I was feeling insecure sort of back 10 years ago about that, because I was thinking more like, is this instrumental music valid enough without a voice, you know? And so I think my confidence gained a bit over the years of thinking like, yeah, this is fine. And like discovering other people who were doing it that I thought were good, and people sort of feedback on my stuff. And then I think some other things that happened where I did get sort of reached out to by a lot of people. But then I was just thinking like, I just didn't think anything was really ever a good fit. So I think I was maybe more cautious about saying like, I wish that we could reach out, because I don't want to say like, I don't want to seem like a jerk if you're coming to me to be like, I don't think this works, you know? And I mean, like, yeah, the Jay stuff was like, he's great. And I felt like that worked so well. And him and I just like got along really well, and it worked out. And I mean, I'd love to do more stuff with him. And I think more about doing it now. I sort of come full circle on that. Like I still feel very much like I did last year when I talked to them, with the Forbes people. But I'm thinking more like I like the idea of producing more for other people in sort of a collaborative sense. You know what I mean? And I think it doesn't even have to be, for so long it's, for me, that only meant MCs, you know, in the hip hop capacity. But I think now I don't even think it has to be that way. Like any kind of vocalists, singers, kind of things like that, I think is good. You know, like if the instrumentals I'm making are speaking to people who are using their voices as instruments, you know, like I think that a lot of that could be good. And I did last year on the Menagerie single I put out. The B-side of that was a vocal track with a girl named Mira Cook, who's also on Gold Robo. Yeah. And I thought like that one was great. Like that sort of really turned it around for me, thinking like, oh, well, actually, like this works well, you know? So I expect to do more of that in the future.
I was going to ask you how your relationship with you brought up Gold Robot right now, how your relationship with Gold Robot is maybe different from the first record label you signed with.
Sure. I mean, just about in every way.
I was suspicious of that, but yeah.
But I think what it more so came to be with that is like Gold Robot, it's the same thing as basically me. It's one dude. His name's Hunter. He's a guy who I met 10 years ago when I was doing choral. And we were just sort of like on the level, like, I love your music. I know you want to make some vinyl. I do too. Like, let's make this record together. And so we started there. And then from then we just sort of started, you know, doing more and working together, you know, to just like help move things along. So it was just like very, very natural, and everybody like feels good. Nobody's getting feels like slighted, you know, like at the old back in the day relationship with the label I had was like, I don't think I ever spoke to the owner of the label. And then like if I tried to, he probably didn't even know who I was. Like he might only know our singer, and our singer was just like trying to kiss that dude's butt nonstop, even though guy's like a major douche. And like I don't know this for sure, but I've heard that the guy who owns Victory has like a Shark Tank hallway. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
Like off of little emo bands. It's just crazy. Hunter does not have a Shark Tank hallway.
Not yet.
Not yet. He might like one. I mean, I'm with you. I'd like it too. But no. So I mean, like that was just more about like being in control and being equals and feeling good in a way that we were helping each other. So it couldn't be more different, you know?
And you feel like you have like, sounds like maybe not such a high pressure situation, or
yeah, exactly. And I
freedom.
think it's funny to just, I mean, I think I have 100% creative freedom. I know that. I basically like have somebody who's got my back and who wants to help, and they're invested too. You know, like with anything that's gone on as long as this has, and how it's sort of grown year after year, it always has that added pressure. So like now, and for a long time in my mind, I still hold Monsterelli in a place where I'm not ever going to rely on it for my like income, right? But also it's become so much of my life, and I do rely on it for a lot of my income. And so now I'm just like, oh, well, I'm here, and like everything I do creatively for me like sort of stems from that special place. And so it's nice working with them and with him, because it's there's no reminder of that pressure. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's just like, it's fine.
We know you're doing that to yourself.
Exactly. Right. It's just me. And I think like I'm actually like pretty good at letting go of that. You know, I think like that's fine. I don't take anything too seriously. And I often like make a lot of music and think like, oh, I'll come back to finish that. And then I just like don't finish it and think like, that's actually perfect. Put it on the album. And then that's it. And I think like that's good. Like not overthinking things and just going with like the like original concept of something, and the way it made you feel is like often always the best.
You just said something very interesting. You just said that Monster Rally in a way is kind of like the core of all of your creative expression. Am I getting that correct? So kind of just the discovery of, and you talk about it, I think it's so wonderful. You talk about it as a place you can go to.
Right.
That's so interesting. So you really feel like that place is kind of like what birthed all of your creative expression, whether it's professional or design or all the different things that you're working on. It all comes from that kind of that place you found with Monster Rally.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And I would even say like, I would call that Monster Rally for me anyway, but I think what it is like, that's just the overall creative space of my brain. So like it's devoted 90% to Monsterelli, whether that's music or artwork or whatever. And even like the other ideas I have out of there, like most of my creative leanings could be connected to that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like whether I'm making artwork or music or even like a product for my company or something, like I just have these things that are coming from this one place. And so I think, I don't know, like I try to embrace that as much as I can, which is why I feel like I don't want to put the pressure on it, because I never starting to feel like if this Monsterelli single or something doesn't take off, or like if I can't get this person on my song, or if I don't blah, 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 I don't want to like hinder my ability to do other things. Whether I think I would or not is hard to say, but I think, at least in my mind, that's where I think like I'm just trying to keep it as pressure free as possible.
In both your music and your visual art, you're kind of in a sense working with found objects.
Yep.
Is there something about the search or the hunt itself that informs your creative process?
Yeah, I mean, I think 100%. Like the whole like collage, whether it's music or artwork, is it's all about discovery for me. I know, and this is an interesting thing for me, that's something I like to think about, that like everything that I need for my next album or something is just like out there yet to be found by me. So like that's an exciting thing, to go and you see what you see what you find. And like, because you chose this one and not that one, you're playing that sample and that winds up on the record that you wind up sharing with people. And it's a whole, it's recycling this old stuff, but also it's like a matter of finding something and a matter of chance that you chose that thing, So I think, yeah, like that informs the whole thing. If I was just sitting here, it would have to be a whole different thing. I mean, if I was just like in a room to make some music, I would like be back with my guitar and 4-track. You know what I mean? Because like I couldn't get the stuff I need to try to make the Monsterelli thing. Like I might make something that sounds like even similar. I don't really know, but it would be through a whole different set of steps.
Right. Do you like the adventure too of that search, like going out? So it's kind of like,
I love it.
That sense of exploration, adventure.
Right.
I kind of think of you sometimes as like I've always explained you to people sometimes as like, he's like a treasure hunter and also a treasure maker. Like he finds the treasure and then makes new treasure out of it.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because that sense of adventure is in your music. I feel like, well, Exotica kind of takes you on an adventure, like,
right.
But where do you go to find your materials, both for your visual art and your records?
All over. And that's actually like exactly how you described it. It's like I'm out there searching, like my like new frontiers of a jungle or something, where another person's doing it, is like the thrift store or a library book sale, like. And I think that what's helpful is that I'm looking for things and choosing things that no one else cares about, like for the most part, no one else cares about. So like, if you're in the record store, and I always like, it's sad now because I think they're gone, but Amoeba Records in Hollywood was like huge place for me out in LA. And I used to like shoot that, go all over like these record stores and stuff, but for the most part, these record stores are so expensive. So you have to go to a place like Amoeba where they have so many sections, and in each section they have the dollar section. So like I would go in and just like world music section, dollar, just like flip through, get whatever looks interesting, or like jazz, easy listening section, or just even like the cheese rock section or something. Just like walk in, $80, 80 records, you know what I mean? Leave, something like that. I don't usually spend anything like over $1, except for like a handful of things I've gotten. But sort of the same way now that I'm back in Cleveland, it's a lot of thrift stores. There's a handful of good record stores here, but they're just small, so they're not quite like that. And it's sometimes actually like in LA, I was doing this a lot, but I used to like to go to Palm Springs to go to a lot of their thrift stores because they just had like great stuff, because a lot of those older people had these collections, and then now they find their way into the thrift stores and then find their way to me, and then I mess with them, and then they find their way to you.
Right. And I would think just Palm Springs in particular, if you're
Oh
thinking
yeah, yeah.
about exotica music, you put on like a Les Baxter record, like I
Right,
immediately am at a pool in Palm Springs with a mojito
right.
in my hand.
Yeah, exactly. And I
I'm sure
actually,
those
back when I
collections
lived
were
there,
rich.
yeah, they were. And I mean, I think I probably bought a lot of them from people at these stores. And when I still lived in LA, I used to go every time I'd be making a record. I would go with my wife and I'd go out to Palm Springs and I would record kind of a lot of it out there.
Oh, wow. You would record in Palm Springs itself.
Yeah, just like take my whole setup and just go set up in an Airbnb for like a week and just record music.
Get you into the right
Yeah, totally, exactly.
architectural space
Yeah,
that's amazing. I read in an article that you've gone all the way to Florida and you like were looking in a retirement. There was like
right.
retirement
I say
communities.
that's the other one I was gonna say. So now that I've been back here, what's actually easier for me is to go like we'll go down to Florida or something, and I'll just like hit up this whole section of Florida for all these like all these like very sleepy retirement communities, thrift stores there, and uh like some of these places actually have like resale shops from the residents, like I
Yeah.
bought some stuff there.
Wow.
um
They have
yeah, and then I
actual
wound up
resale. Oh, wow.
yeah, like some of that stuff is the best, honestly. And then there's just like a handful of record stores down there, but I don't know like what even community they're serving so much. But I like the last time I was there, I went and I found this one that had like such a good like section of all this stuff, and I went and I pulled like 100 records for the guy, and the guy was like, I haven't priced any of these, so like you're gonna have to come back. And so I remember 2 days later I came back on the way to the airport and was just like, so or like where are we at? You know what I mean? And I wound up spending like way too much money on records because I didn't want to have wasted this dude's time. But also like it was fine. So like I got them and then I went to the UPS store and just like sent them home. And then that most of what I bought there is the Adventures album. So like that's like the whole thing. So yeah, it's cool. Like I don't know, like I love that kind of stuff. For me, there's three big parts about making the music, and it's just like the search and discovery, the actual creation of the music, and then the creation of the artwork. And like all three of those can't exist without the other.
Right. And I wanted to talk about the creation of the music next. Do you find it especially meaningful or dynamic to work with, like you're working with physical objects, like you're getting records,
Yeah.
or you're doing handmade collage.
Right.
Is there something particularly meaningful or especially meaningful because we're in such a digital age where you can just pull
Right.
things off? Do you find it especially meaningful to work with those things in this digital age?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's like what's comforting for me about it. Like when I started making this stuff, like I was saying, I was like having high anxiety and sort of stuff like that. Like I could go to Monsterelli Zone, make some Monsterelli music or whatever. And like I needed some power to plug in my sampler and record player, but I don't need a computer. Like I don't need my phone. And even now when I do it, when I'm making music or something, I'll turn my phone off. I won't even take it. Like I don't want to be reminded that like Instagram exists. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want to be away. And I think that's a big thing for me. And that's why I like the sampler I use, because it's very much like very tactile. Like I don't program it to loop these things when you hear them in the songs. Like I'm triggering everything because that's just the only way I know how to do it. Like I record all my albums in GarageBand because I'm just like keeping it as streamlined as possible. So just like an interface to record, I'm working on my sampler, like light edits, and then export. That's it. I could be, and especially with the vinyl, like you're talking about the physical, like that's a huge thing for me because it's just like feeling that and putting it on there and seeing the grooves and thinking like, all right, well, let's just like jump to the beginning of this song because that might have something cool or whatever. And the limitations in that are what drive the whole sound. The problem I find for myself, although some people thrive on this, is that with digital stuff, there are 1,000 options. I mean, not 1,000. There's literally endless options. So like, how am I supposed to decide? I'm going to get my paradox of choice or whatever is going to just crush me before I do anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't like, I've tried a few times to start to produce a little bit in digitally and use like Ableton or something. And every time I'm always just like setting up these like kits for your drums or something is just so confusing when I could just like be banging it out on the sampler.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think, and I definitely, there's downsides to that, but for me, I just, if I'm not like fully ingrained in that process, or if I'm on my computer and like tweak my reverb or something, I'm just gonna be like, I gotta check my email real quick. And then I'm just like, suddenly I'm working, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you're not in the same space.
And also I think limitation can actually fuel creativity.
It's huge. Like, I think some people thrive on endless options, but for the most part, people thrive on a handful of pieces of sources and materials. You know, at least for me, especially like with the music and with the artwork and stuff, it's just about minimal tools, a handful of stuff you've found and chosen, and then, you know, whatever you want to do with that.
Also, I think with this kind of more analog way, it adds a sense of texture that you just can't get from a digital source.
Yeah,
but.
I agree. And I think a lot of the too, with the samples at least, are the more beat up records. You know, like I bought, they're $1. Like I said, they're kind of crummy. There's like a little bit of scratches. The sound quality is not great necessarily, but all of those little elements are like the seasoning on your stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're going to go and sample some like super clean something directly from Spotify or whatever, you're going to then try to mess it up in your digital workstation or whatever. And then like, so yeah, you get there, but then you wind up with the manufactured sound. So like, and some of that's good, and like you might not even care, but you don't even need to do that if you're going in the other way. Like I remember I said this to somebody else the other day, but about how I don't ever really read anything on like comments, you know, on YouTube or something, but I found myself on one of my YouTube videos and somebody was just like most of them were good, some of them were bad, but somebody was just like, I cannot stand this vinyl effect on every single song. And I was just like, all right, man, like there's no vinyl effect.
Right.
And then like, if you don't like that, like I'm sorry, you're done. You're not going to like my music, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't like that texture, then you don't get it.
Right. And that's fine. Some people don't. There's plenty of music I don't like.
Yeah. I'd say there's probably more music I don't like than music that I do.
Yeah,
I like a lot of music.
That has to be true. I would say I like so much stuff, but I still probably don't like most of
Yeah.
it.
Each one of your albums has its own distinct musical and visual identity, and like all the parts fit together and kind of tell a story. How do you achieve this, like, I call it like aesthetic, but I think also narrative kind of cohesion?
I think, you know, when I was first making the records, I wasn't thinking like so much about this. It was always like the way that has helped me sort of, most of my albums have been made in a particular place. So like, no, I don't think any two albums have been made in the same physical space. For a long time, I was sort of moving around a lot. Like the albums I'm recording or what I'm making now will be the first time I made Adventures, and I'll make this next one where I am now. But so it was always just about like being in a place, making whatever music I was making at that time, and then keep putting it together.
I see.
For the first few albums. And then after that, I started to come into them a little bit more sort of conceptually, because they were kind of existing in a place for me. And so most of the newer ones anyway, all have like a pretty defined like narrative and story arc in my mind that wound up sort of dictating the sequencing and the track lists and all that, and then winds up sort of informing the artwork too. Most people don't know about any of them, obviously, because they're mostly just for me. But, and I don't want to dictate too much to people. Like I want you to see and feel it for yourself. But yeah, I don't know. Just sort of like I'm inspired a lot by the records I'm finding. So like, for example, like the Mystery Cove record was the whole narrative there is just like there's a couple and they're on their honeymoon, and it winds up just being this like Scooby-Doo style exotica mystery, and you know what I mean, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so whatever, it winds up taking that whole thing. And so the cover art is just sort of like supposed to be like this old movie poster where it has like the grayed out background and like the faces of the people, and then just whatever, you know.
Right. I think I read that you said that it was like a movie of the week was kind of
exactly TV movie, because some of the stuff that I was sampling, it was like a handful of soundtracks from these old TV movies. It was like Adventures in Paradise or something. That's where the one came from.
And I read you said something interesting too, where you said like it's funny because these records have like you have this like cheesy like ultimate exotic vacation kind of vibe to it, but then you also have like Ritual of the Savage and like voodoo kind of, and Mystery Cove was sort of a combination of those two like energies.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah, just like it's so idyllic and beautiful, but also like the people might be scary. You know what I mean? But like okay, but there's like never like any real high stakes. It's just like I don't know. It's just I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah. You so we're kind of in an era now because of the digital age again. That's more single oriented, like single track.
Big
Artists
time.
really just care about a single track. You seem to be more interested in creating an entire album. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'll listen to one of your records and which I do all the time, but I'll put it on and then I can't believe it's over.
Right.
And is that something that you're consciously interested in? Like you're really interested in assembling an entire album?
Yeah.
Is that something
It's much harder for me to think about a single, especially because, I mean, if you know the music, the nature of it is not so much about the individual. It's about like every song in a single track is just like a little bit of like a vibe or like a cinematic moment in the whole story arc, you know what I mean, of the record itself. Or even in just, if you're not even going to go to like the conceptual level, in just like this 40 minutes of music, you know what I mean?
right?
So it's much harder for me to make songs that stand alone. And it's tough because for the most part, that's what you get. You know what I mean? And even the records that come out for people, it's generally like a assembly of their past year's singles with a bit of filler,
Right.
So I don't know. I've always been interested in the full album, mostly because of just the vinyl interests of not only the sampling, but of creating back to the vinyl. And for me, basically every time I make the records, I make two. I make an A side or a B side, and so it's always just like intermission, you know what I mean, and then
Right.
whatever on the other side. So it's a much harder for me to think about it in a shorter context. But on the other hand, I think it's harder for me to think like, hey, listen, just like give me a chance, listen to my music, give me like 40 minutes. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're lucky to get 40 seconds from somebody. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like, I think that's actually like a bit of a hindrance to me in my, my career, I guess, if you want to say, with music. But also, I'm interested in creating these pieces of music, and I have made smaller ones. Like the Flight to the Jungle or something. Basically, it was an EP, but was 2 tracks or something. Like for me, that's about as short as I can go and feel like something is complete.
Right. Well, your music does have and even though we as listeners may not be aware of it, there is a sense of a story.
Right.
And I was going to ask you if you had ever been interested in maybe composing music for a film or for a
Yeah, I'd
TV
love that.
show.
Yeah, I've thought actually a lot
plans for
about that. No plans as of yet. The problem is that I haven't. It's tough. Like that's something I would absolutely love to do, but unless somebody comes to me to do it, I would have to produce them myself. And so like I don't think while I'd love to do that, I just don't trust myself to actually get it done. You know what I mean? I would love to produce. I would love to. Back when Mystery Cove came out, I was thinking like my brother-in-law is like a director, filmmaker, writer, and I was thinking like, oh well, like let's just make the movie.
Yeah.
Like it can be cheap, whatever. Let's just make the Mystery Cove movie.
Right.
But ultimately, I mean, like that fell through because it's just the undertaking is huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to do it. If anybody hears it and you're looking to produce a film or something, let me know. I'd love to do it because I think some of the best soundtracks or some of the best albums are soundtracks by one artist.
You've said, I've read in several interviews or a couple of interviews, you've said that Madlib and Brian Wilson,
Right.
kind of more than anybody else, have changed the way that you think about music. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did they change the way you thought about music?
I think it's like for them more so as like if I was looking at my musical development, or even just as my life in a linear way, there would be all these bumps or whatever. But like a couple of them would be like the discovery of Brian Wilson, and then like the discovery of Madlib. Because for
Right.
me, like I came from, like I was really when I was younger, I was like the first music I was into were like radio hip hop, and then just like punk music, and then like emo, screamo, and then I was getting to some indie music or whatever. And then I had listened to bands inspired by the Beach Boys, but never really listened to it themselves, right? So I was listening to like Of Montreal or something, what I mean, with the vocal harmonies. And then I was just like, oh, someone's like, hey, you should listen to this Pet Sounds album,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, whatever. Like I know that my mom likes the Beach Boys or whatever. And so like but then I remember listening to it, and then like for a period of time, I listened to Pet Sounds like at least once a day for like a year. You know what I mean? Like it just changed the game. And then I got like so interested in Brian Wilson and the production of it, and the fact that like he made almost all of it himself, and like that was really inspiring to me. And just like, I don't know, the way that those songs are and the instrumentals, and I don't know, like there's something very special about his music that that made me look at the music as a whole differently, you know. So fast forward like a couple years later, discovering Madlib was the same thing, you know what I mean? But it was just in a different sense, you know. It was like, all right, so I thought like hip hop production or something was one way, and then I realized listening to this is like, A, it's an art in itself, you don't need an MC, and B, like you can just do anything, you know what I mean? Like those Madlib instrumentals, like the records are just like, oh, like that dude will sample anything, and he's in it, but still it sounds like him, and it's just like there, he doesn't not caring about like his mixing or something. It's just like creating a vibe with your music, and then boom. And that was the same way too, like changed my whole mindset musically.
You said there's 3 steps. There's the discovery of the music, the search and the discovery for the music. There's the creation of the music. And then the final part, you said, is the visual,
right.
Kind of the visual creation, the creation of the visuals for it, the album cover and everything. When does that start? When does that final, are you kind of working on that, noodling around with that while you're recording, or does that come at the end? Or
like I'll usually like maybe collect some source material or something for the artwork, or I'll like go digging for some books, or have an idea in my mind about it. But I don't usually make the artwork until after the album is done, and I'll usually make it while like listening to the album and putting it all together, and then like listening to the masters or something. So it almost always happens totally after.
And where do you find these because there's so much color in what you're doing, and is there like, and the images do often seem to come from a similar place or the same source, maybe.
Right.
Is there?
Well, some do and some don't, actually. Like a lot of the stuff, if I don't even know if anybody would notice this, but for the past like year or so, I've gotten very into, it's funny because I never used to get this. I was always about like photographic imagery, but I've started to get very into using cutout images of illustrations, of like photorealistic illustrations. So I use like the Castaways album is a good example of this, where everything on that it's collage and it's cut out, but it's a like a photorealistic illustration from an old book. So like it's all from different sources, but because of that, when it's together, it looks almost like I just drew it. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm trying to get. Yeah. So I think the stuff is really from all types of different sources. I mean, it's everywhere. Back when I was first starting, I think I was like a lot of other people and just like all about like National Geographic or like Life magazine or something. But what happened to me is that I started to feel like I started seeing the same cutouts in a lot of people's artwork and thinking like, that's cool, but I just want to try to stand out a little bit. So that drove me to finding just like weirder stuff, you know, and like that's where a lot of the plant stuff came from. Is I was always really interested in that, but I just wanted to make my own world. You know what I mean? Right. So I just like dove hard into the like flora and fauna.
And visually speaking, do you feel like you've entered more and more over the years into your own world?
I do. Yeah. I think especially like I was recently looking back at some of my old stuff, and it's similar enough that it looks a bit like my style and that it's collage. But I think as you see the time go, it's more like, that it's even become a little more rigid in style, but it's very much like this place, you know?
Right. And do you feel like it's becoming kind of more and more, I don't want to say defined, but like, I feel like, I look back at some of the album covers, like let's say Coral, and it's great, but then you move forward.
But I'd never make that now. That's the thing. Like I recently, like, we're gonna repress Beyond the Sea and Return to Paradise onto vinyl, and so like I'm preparing that packaging, and I'm almost sort of like I kind of want to change this, you know, but like obviously I'm not going to change it, but I think like I wouldn't make those same decisions now. You know, I still love the work and I think it looks good for the thing. And for a lot of people who know my stuff, they only maybe even know some of these records, but it's just interesting to see how much your decision-making changes. And that's like in making artwork of any kinds, that's all it is. It's just like, what choices are you making?
Each one of your records, when you press the vinyl itself, I noticed you did a beautiful, like, I think almost like a translucent, like blue,
Right.
How
For
important is
Castaways.
that to you? Yeah, for
Uh,
Castaways, it's
Super
gorgeous.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, like because I think I came from a design background, like I'm just like a big packaging nerd. Like I love that kind of stuff. And so like for me, like the vinyl color and the splatter and the labels and the packaging and then the gatefold and the back and all that, like for the vast majority of people listening to music, I see like a little screen grab of an album cover on their Spotify. For another group of them, maybe they see my artwork on my Instagram, but for a handful of them, because they're limited, they get the full album. And so like it seems maybe funny the amount of mind space I give to that, but that's like as important to me. Like I think so much about every little piece. um yeah, like the Castaways artwork for me is like probably I mean it's my most recent, so maybe that's why I feel that way, but it's my favorite one. I think like all the pieces are just together, the concept is good, like I don't know, I love it.
So would you say that that's kind of like the premium experience for like the Monster Rally experience as a listener? Like if you really want like the,
I think yeah, like if you want to be tactile about it and feel the record and see all the stuff, like yeah, that's the experience. But I also think if you're gonna if you just have your headphones on and you have any like one song that pops up and you're just in your world for a second, like that's the experience. So it's whether or not how long that's lasting and if it's how many senses are being involved. You know what I mean?
it does, when I do listen to your music, I feel like I see it. I see I told you when I wrote
Right.
you the letter, I said when the first time I listened to it, I really felt like I was living in a loft, and then suddenly like a tropical garden appeared around me, and like
Right.
it's very environmental.
Yeah, and that's why I love it, and that it's the same for me when I'm making it, and like I think maybe that's the sort of sounds I'm drawn to when I'm making the records too. Is so it's like, uh, yeah, you just like get away for a minute, and that's why it's nice not to have with the absence of a human voice, you fill your own space. So when you have instrumental music, that just happens, and everybody experiences it differently, which is also what I like so much. Like I have these ideas when I listen to the music and I think about like I have visions and I think whatever, but other people feel differently and they have different things, or they heard it in a different place and it was special to them, or they, because of where they were at, they imagine different things. And so I think, I don't know, I love the different experiences that not even just mine, but instrumental music in general evokes with people.
What is your work, and it can be the music or whatever, but what was the most unexpected place your work has taken you?
Oh man. I I'm not sure. I think that's an interesting question. I don't really know. I think a lot of the places seem not expected necessarily, but I think, like whether it's locations to play shows or like affiliations with certain like brands or like other producers or something, I think it all, I don't know how much of it has been unexpected. I'm always like surprised when I hear about people like being fans of the music. Like even people I meet or something are it just always surprises me because I do it, I make it myself, and I rarely play shows and all this stuff. So it's just funny for me. Like if I didn't see the Spotify data or something, I would think like, is anybody listening?
Right. Right. Yeah.
um, I don't know. I think not maybe the most unexpected or anything, but the highlight of where this has taken me, I think, over the past several years was my show in LA, at the Subliminal Gallery. Like I said earlier, that I was a fan of Shepard Fairey, and I wish that every show I did could be this like multimedia sort of
Right.
experience. Because for me, when I'm playing in like shows or something, I have a projector or something, and I think that's cool. But no matter what, you're still in this like sort of bar or small club kind of environment, which is cool, but is not. You're just missing out on the whole thing, Like I'm always joking that I want to go do a tour of botanical gardens. Like there's a really beautiful one in Cleveland, and I think like, let me just go do a show in this botanical garden. You know what I mean? I wrote them about it actually, but they never got back to me. I think I understand maybe they're afraid people are going to mess up the flowers. And actually, a couple of years ago when I started working with my booking agent, she was just like so on board with all that stuff. Like she was trying to get me these shows in like these big living garden rooms of museums and stuff. And I mean, honestly, this year probably would have involved some of that stuff, had it not been obviously how it is, which is too bad. But hopefully when things are better and we can be safer about it or whatever, we can start to do some stuff like that. Because for me, I love to play the music out. I love to meet the people, but I'd much rather have those sort of sort of sensory experiences, involved with the music. So I know that's not exactly the answer to your question, but it's one nonetheless.
That's lovely. No, that's great. What has been the most challenging thing for you living this creative life? Because I think you make your living like completely from your work.
Yeah, so it's exactly, from my work in one way or another. I mean, it's Monster Alley, artwork, and Valley Cruise. So I don't have another job. That's what I'm doing. And while they're all pretty separate, actually, they're just all part of the whole. I mean, I'd be lost without my wife, because she's the one. I can be over here just thinking like, well, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or whatever. But like, she's a much more analytical person, and I think you'd find this with a lot of people who work creatively. Is that like next to them is a person who's much better at their life. But I think the biggest challenge really is just not letting myself get overwhelmed by like pressure to create and to be successful at creating. Because like, I mean, anybody who makes things knows like you make a lot of stuff that's not great. And that's all right. Like you have to get through some garbage stuff to get that good stuff. And even still, like the Adventures album, I think is like one of my best records. I really like feel proud of it. But I spent like 6 months making music for that album, and I hated all of it. Like didn't use any of it. And I think a lot of that had to do with my source material. Like I just wasn't happy. And then like around that time where that turned is when I was in Florida and bought all those records. And when I came back, I made the record in like 6 weeks. You know what I mean? So just like not getting discouraged, because there's so much to get discouraged about in creating. And it's a struggle not to.
You talked about that Overgrown show, which, just for the listeners listening in, it was held at Echo Park Rising. It was in a gallery. You were surrounded by your artwork.
Right.
And you were playing live. And then now you've released, I guess it starts with Floating Island, and then there was the Overgrown show, kind of, I think, was happening at the same time. It was coordinated. And then now you've released this Castaways Volume 1. What are you working on now? What's next?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on the next full length. So and I've made like, I don't know, maybe like 30% sort of through what I'm thinking for it, but we'll see. Like I kind of was having a similar thing where I was a little bit slow to start, but now I feel like I've kind of hit my stride a bit. So hopefully that'll be done in a little bit and be like springtime to come out. We talked a little bit about it, but I'm also working on some production for some other people, which would be very cool. I'd be excited about that. And then also a couple of collaborations with some people, some friends of mine. I don't know if you are familiar with any of the Monster Alley and Rum Tum albums, but my buddy Rum Tum and I were working on some new stuff too. So
cool.
Yeah.
I asked you what is most challenging. What is most rewarding about your life? What do you sit back and reflect, or if you allow yourself to reflect, what do you sit back and say, like, what do you find the most rewarding about what you do?
Most rewarding is hearing people talk about feeling inspired by things I've done, because it's just such a cycle with that. Like we talked all about Brian Wilson or Madlib, or that's on the high level for me, but just on every little section there's people who I'm doing what I'm doing because of them. You know what I mean? And so to know that you're sort of playing a part like that to other people is it's huge. And that's like at the times when I'm feeling the most discouraged about like, oh, like everything I make sucks. And like, I don't feel like that often, but sometimes you do. And I think like, then I feel like it's always around that time I'll get like an email from somebody being like, I just want to let you know, like I was inspired to start like creating collage because of your work. And then like it's been so fulfilling to me in my life. And I think like, oh, like first of all, thank you anybody who's written me, because you're amazing. You didn't have to do that, but I'm happy that, that just makes you feel like it's not even about me. It's about what I created out there. And people experience it differently, but I think like, okay, like let's try to make some more.
Well, Ted, I cannot thank you enough for coming on to Interview Time and talking to me. Can we just, for my audience, just list out where we can find kind of where people should go if this is the first time they're discovering your music? Where should they go to?
Yeah, so I think just wherever you like to stream music, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you listen to, just search Monster Alley. All my records are there. If you're the kind of person who wants to download it, you can get it all on Bandcamp. You can stream on Bandcamp. It's all on Bandcamp for free. If you're interested in the visual stuff, my Instagram is probably the best. It's at Ted Feighan. It's not Monsterelli, but if you look at Monsterelli, you'll probably find it. And finally, you could do monster-rally.com. So just search Monsterelli, you'll find it.
You'll find
That's
it.
what I always tell my mom. She's always like, "Where can I find that thing?" I said, "Just search Monsterelli, Mom. You're gonna find it."
Also, check out Valley Cruise Press. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on there.
Yeah, and what's cool about Valley Cruise, we work with a lot of other artists too. So that's like our platform to work. I do a lot of the creative myself, but also work with a ton of artists who I really love their work, and that's been super rewarding too. So yeah, check it out.
Nice. Well, Ted, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, you've been listening to Interview Time.
Hàn